Good morning. Right, so one of the things that you often find yourself doing when you're out taking photographs is painting with a little bit of light in the early morning or the late afternoon. We've now got this Leofoto FL-120N, which is essentially a LED panel where you can adjust the brightness of the light as well as the color temperature of the light. And one of the nice things about it, and in fact I'm even filming myself using one right now, is that you can get a much softer light source whenever you are painting with light. So I'm out at Montesquieu at the moment and I've got some beautiful aloes. It's coming towards the end of their season, but what I'm going to try and do now is mix ambient light, and there is a bit of ambient light back here, and I'm going to mix ambient light and also light up the aloes themselves using one of these panels. Now the nice thing about it is, unlike a torch or a flash bulb, you get a much softer light by moving the light about. So for instance, I'm just going to switch this guy on over here. Now this is it's a 5,000 milliamp battery pack, and as you can see you get some nice warm light out of that, and at 100% you'll still get about an hour and a half of light. Now I don't need it to be at 100%, so I'm going to just drop this down a little bit, and you can actually see these aloes that I'm going to be lighting up just using the panel. Okay, so I'm going to switch off the light over here in a moment, and I'm going to try a quick shot just to get this all the way I want it. But so follow along for a little bit. So the light over here that I'm using is actually right down at 15%, because to try and get the mix between the ambient and the foreground, I'm using almost a 2-minute exposure in time mode. Because of the softness of the light that you're using, it also works really well when you're doing panoramic work. So now you don't have the same problems as using a single light source, which often produces shadows that don't necessarily gel together. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is the light that we're using, or that I've been using this morning. Now the basic way to control it is you've got 3 buttons at the top over here, and essentially you long press to start it, and you'll see that it warms up itself, and then now you've got your light over here, and you can control between your intensity and the color of the light simply by clicking that same M button again and between the two. Then you've got a power down and a power up button. So if I want to brighten it up, you can see, there we go, brightening it up, it gets pretty bright over there, and you can obviously power it down. Now what's impressive about this particular LED panel is that even at 100%, so I'm going to push it all the way to 100, you still have your timer over here. Now I've been using this for quite a lot and I haven't charged it for a while, but even at 100% I still have 62 minutes of power output left. Now this morning I've been working with this for the last sort of half an hour or so, but I've been actually using it at a much lower power setting, and you can see at 9% I've got 300 minutes almost of time ahead of me. So it's a very, very useful light for wanting to light your subject up. And as you can see, I mean, photographing something like these aloes over here, I can get some lovely light just on it, just simply by, in fact, if I just demonstrate this quickly, I'm going to push my power up a little bit over here, and let's just get this up to 100%. And it gives you a better idea on how this actually can be used to light a subject. So just using this particular photograph, I'm going to quickly take a shot with everything set up so you can get an idea of it. Okay, so we're back in the studio, and this is another example of where these little LED panels are actually worth their weight in gold. Now basically, if I'm photographing a product such as this is just a demonstration over here, you'd usually use a set of flashes, so something like a hot shoe flash, or even bigger. So what I usually use is things like these. This is an AD200 Godox flash on a softbox, and we'd use these to be able to photograph whatever we have inside the studio. Now the thing is, if I'm out traveling and I'm doing documentary work, then suddenly I need something that's a little bit smaller and more manageable than using a whole bunch of flashes. And in situations like that, 1 or 2 of these little lights is actually fantastic. So rather than having a big light with a softbox or a scrim or a beauty dish or something like that to photograph the product, now instead of doing that, you can actually just use a little LED panel like this. So for instance, I have this LED panel now set to, it's down to 32%, and it's at daylight light rating, and I would set my camera up for a longer exposure. It's a nice dark studio, so you can do this, and you would literally paint your subject with light, much like this. Now, you don't need to necessarily paint with light. You can also just use a single exposure and just have it pointing towards the subject. So for instance, I photographed artisanal seeds before for a client while shooting documentary work, and rather than having a great big flash, I can just use one little LED panel. And what's great is it'll fit inside your back pocket, so you don't really need to worry about having to handle a whole bunch of equipment while you're out in the field shooting. Okay, so I find these things are fantastic. They're very useful for being able to paint with light in the early morning or at night when you're out photographing things like quiver trees or aloes or anything like that. I also find that they're particularly useful if I'm having to photograph smaller products like watches or phones, for instance. If I'm doing something like that in the studio and I'm wanting to paint with light rather than use a large softbox with a flash attached to it. They're great for in the field. So they're a pretty useful piece of kit just to keep around. I always find that there's something to be able to be shot with them, and they're fantastic in a pinch when I've forgotten all my other lights. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, please do drop me a line if you want to know more about the Leofoto LED panels. You can also email me on emil@linephoto.co.za or emil@natureslight.co.za. Always happy to chat more about any of the Leofoto products and these little panels. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. I will try and put more of these together in the future. Thanks very much for watching.